Hey there, deep diver. Ready to, rethink everything. We're diving into Adam Grant's Think Again today. And let me tell you, this book, total fire.
It's true. And Grant starts, he opens with this crazy story. Wildfire, smoke jumper, Wagner Dodge is his name.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've heard about this.
And it's about this thing he did to survive that, well, might sound crazy, but it just might have, it saved his whole crew's lives.
Okay, so paint the picture for me. It's the 1940s,
Mhm.
Montana. You're surrounded by this inferno. Flames are looking at your heels. What do you do?
Run, right. That's what most of Dodge's crew did. They ran.
Yeah.
But Dodge, he just stops.
He stops.
Yeah, in the middle of this inferno, and you're not going to believe this, he lights a match, starts another fire.
Whoa. Okay. Talk about a rethinking mic drop. It's so counterintuitive.
And Grant's point exactly sometimes is our old instincts, the things we think are tried and true that are going to burn us.
It's true.
Yeah, and tragically, almost everyone else in Dodge's crew, they perished because they clung to that instinct to flee. That's how powerful this whole rethinking thing can be.
Wow. Powerful story. It really makes you think, what fires are we running from in our own lives when maybe, just maybe, we should be pulling a Dodge?
It's a good question. And Grant says we're all guilty of this, of clinging to outdated beliefs. He calls it seizing and freezing. Seriously, we update our phones more often than we update our opinions.
Ugh, it's so true. Okay, but why are we like this? Is there a scientific reason we're all so stuck in our ways?
Well, there's this cognitive bias. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. You know that friend who's convinced they give amazing advice, but their track record, not so much. Classic Dunning-Kruger. Basically, it means that the less competent we are, the more likely we are to overestimate our abilities.
Ouch. This is getting a little too real.
We've all been there. But Grant, he takes this beyond, everyday stuff. He points to all these studies on, for instance, management. And guess what they found? The countries that had the lowest management quality, they had the highest opinions of their own skills.
Oh, wow. A recipe for disaster for
Yeah.
sure. So how do we avoid that? How do we avoid that peak of Mount Stupid, as Grant calls it? Where do we even begin to climb down?
You might not like this, but it starts with doubt.
Doubt.
Doubt, but not crippling self-doubt, right?
Yeah.
But just the humility to admit, hey, I don't have all the answers. It doesn't mean we're incompetent. It just means there's always more to learn.
Yeah. That's like that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And Grant actually uses the example of Iceland's former prime minister, Davy Oddsson, to kind of illustrate this.
Oh, right. Oddsson, yeah. He was so convinced, so sure of his own, economic genius that he just refused to acknowledge, any of the warning signs of the financial crisis.
Oh.
Well, it led to his downfall.
Wow. Okay, so maybe not the best example of rethinking. But then there's this other story that Grant talks about, right? About Hala Tómasdóttir. She ran for president of Iceland, and she actually completely owned what you were just talking about. What was it called?
Imposter syndrome.
Yes, imposter syndrome.
But she viewed it, as an advantage.
Right. Instead of pretending to have all the answers, she was out there seeking advice, looking for different perspectives.
But it totally worked. Voters loved it. She was just honest. I don't know, but I'm willing to learn.
It's powerful.
It is. And that's something Grant talks about, right? We should all strive to be more like scientists, constantly, updating our hypotheses or, I guess, our beliefs based on new data.
It's a very freeing way to think about it.
It is.
Yeah, it's like detaching our opinions from our identities. Just scientists can let go of old theories. It can say, okay, that didn't pan out. But they don't feel like they're losing a part of themselves.
Right. They don't take it personally.
Exactly. And we can do the same thing. We can evolve our views without feeling personally attacked. So it's less about clinging to our old ideas and more about being open to, updating our mental software.
Exactly. And speaking of which, you know who's really good at updating their mental software? Super forecasters.
Oh, yeah. The people who can, predict the future with crazy accuracy. How did they do it? What's their secret?
They don't just tolerate being wrong, they get excited about it. One super forecaster, Jean-Pierre Bogams, said, and I quote, "Try to disprove yourself. When you're wrong, say, hey, I discovered something."
I love that. So it's not about, never making mistakes. It's about how we react to those mistakes,
Yeah.
which kind of makes me think about disagreeing in general. How do we get better at disagreeing without, turning into internet trolls?
Right. Well, Grant has some really interesting thoughts on that. He suggests we think of arguments more like a dance than a war.
The dance. That's a much better metaphor than the usual battle of wits we often see. So how do we actually put this into practice?
I wouldn't recommend like a debate floor boombox, though that would make faculty meetings a lot more entertaining. Grant points to Harish Natarajan, this world champion debater, who uses this technique called steel manning. Instead of going for the weakest point in your opponent's argument, you try to find the strongest version of their position.
So it's about understanding where they're coming from, even if you disagree.
Yeah.
That takes some serious mental gymnastics.
It does, but it's also about finding that common ground, those points of connection where you can actually build a bridge instead of a wall. And you know what else Grant says is key? Less is more.
You mean quality over quantity when it comes to arguments? I can get behind that. Nothing worse than being on the receiving end of a verbal avalanche.
Exactly. Stick to your strongest points, the ones that truly resonate with you. And speaking of strong arguments, you won't believe who Grant had a debate with, an AI project debater, to be exact.
Oh, seriously. Now that's a story I need to hear more about, but I have a feeling that's a whole other deep dive.
Yeah.
All this talk about rethinking has me thinking about how we learn in the first place. Isn't that where it all begins?
Absolutely. Grant devotes a whole section to rethinking in education, and it's pretty eye-opening. He talks about this teacher, Erin, who uses these really creative methods to help her students learn how to rethink. For example, she'll have them read from an outdated history textbook
Wait, on purpose. Why not just give them the most up-to-date information?
because she wants them to see how the stories we tell about the past can change over time, and how what we consider a fact today might have been seen completely differently in the past. It challenges those ingrained assumptions about textbooks being the ultimate source of truth.
That's brilliant. It's like we always talk about learning from history, but she's actually teaching them to think critically about history.
Exactly. And she doesn't stop there. She'll also have her students create their own textbook sections about modern life, but with one major twist: all the main characters are women and girls.
I love that. I bet that sparks some interesting conversations about representation and whose voices are traditionally heard or not heard in history books.
Absolutely. It's a powerful way to challenge the status quo and help students see the world from different perspectives. And that's what Grant argues is key. We need to be teaching kids to think like scientists from a young age, not just accepting information at face value, but questioning it, designing experiments, and revising their thinking based on new evidence.
Which means moving away from that traditional model where the teacher is the keeper of all knowledge, right?
Exactly. There's another amazing teacher Grant profiles, Ron Berger, who actually encourages his students to embrace confusion.
I'm someone who gets easily frustrated by confusion, but I can see how reframing it as part of the learning process could be really powerful.
It's about normalizing the struggle. Berger's approach is all about getting kids to be active learners, identifying problems, forming hypotheses, and testing them out for themselves.
It sounds like they're practically running their own mini science labs in the classroom. So we've talked about challenging assumptions in the classroom, but what about the workplace? I imagine rethinking is pretty crucial there too, especially in high-stakes environments.
Absolutely. Grant talks about the importance of building learning cultures in workplaces, and he highlights some really interesting examples from places like NASA and the Gates Foundation. One key factor he emphasizes is psychological safety.
Psychological safety, is that like wearing a helmet in a meeting?
Not quite. It's about creating an environment where people feel comfortable speaking up, sharing their ideas, and even admitting mistakes without fear of punishment. Because if people are afraid to be wrong, they're not going to be willing to rethink anything.
Makes sense. Nobody wants to stick their neck out if it's going to get chopped off.
Exactly. Grant uses the example of Ellen Ochoa, the first Hispanic woman in space. She was the only one who voted against launching a space shuttle because she had concerns about a sensor problem.
Was she right?
She was. It could have been another disaster like the Columbia. It's a powerful example of how crucial it is to create a culture where people feel safe speaking truth to power.
Well, that's a seriously inspiring story. So how do leaders actually create this kind of psychological safety? Is it a top-down thing?
It definitely starts with leadership. Grant argues that leaders need to model humility, admitting when they don't know something, and being open to feedback. It's not about being the smartest person in the room, but about creating a space where everyone feels valued and respected enough to contribute their best thinking.
So less my way or the highway, more let's figure this out together.
Exactly. And when people feel safe to learn and grow, the whole organization benefits. It's about fostering a mindset of continuous improvement, where rethinking isn't just encouraged, it's expected.
Which makes me think about our own individual journeys of growth, especially when it comes to our careers. Grant has a lot to say about that too, right? Like rethinking that whole what do you want to be when you grow up question.
Oh, absolutely. He actually argues that it's one of the most useless questions we can ask kids.
Useless. Okay, now you have to tell me more. Why does Grant think it's so bad to ask kids about their dream jobs?
Because it's like so limiting, you
Yeah.
know? It makes them think of careers as these fixed things, these identities, instead of like, a path that can change. I mean, can you imagine choosing what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're like 9?
Right, like what if you decide you want to be an archaeologist when you're 8 and then you realize you're actually meant to be, like, a pastry chef?
Exactly. Talk about a recipe for a quarter life
So
crisis.
what's a better question to ask instead of what do you want to be?
Grant says focus on actions, not identities. Like, what does the kid love to do? What are they like fired up about? They love building things, organizing, helping others. Those passions are clues,
Yeah.
not destiny set in stone.
I love that. Give them the freedom to explore and experiment and change their minds a million times if they want to, because it's never too late to rethink, right?
Never too late. And this actually ties into something Grant calls identity foreclosure. And it's not just about careers, it's when we get stuck. We latch onto the sense of self, whether it's our job or our relationships or even our beliefs, and we don't even like explore other
So
options.
we're closing doors before we even know what's behind them.
Exactly. And that leads to like a lot of what ifs later on, Grant's advice. Regular career checkups.
Ooh, like a teeth cleaning, but for your professional life.
Exactly. Take some time, maybe once, twice a year, whatever works for you, and reflect. Like, is your work still what you value? Are you learning? Are you excited to wake up on Monday morning?
Those are such good questions. And it's not just about careers either, right? Grant says we should be doing these checkups on our relationships too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
are the people we're with, are they still bringing us joy? Are we growing together?
100%. And he tells this great story about his student who was like obsessed with finding this perfect partner, had this whole checklist, successful, ambitious, the whole 9 yards. But he was dating someone who made him happy, but she didn't fit the checklist.
Oh, wow. So he was so busy searching for the one that he almost missed the amazing person right in front of him.
It's so easy to get caught up in the idea of what we think we want, that we miss what's good for us. And Grant actually challenges another big idea we have, this whole like relentless pursuit of happiness.
Wait, is there something wrong with wanting to be happy?
No, of course not. But Grant's point is that when we're constantly chasing happiness, we actually end up less happy.
It's like that saying, right? The more you chase something, the more it eludes you.
Exactly. He says we should be focusing on building a meaningful life.
So instead of asking, will this make me happy? We should be asking, will this make a difference?
Now you're getting it.
Mm.
It's all about finding that sweet spot between, what we're passionate about and what actually gives our life meaning.
Deep divers, this deep dive has been incredible. We learned so much from Adam Grant. We talked about questioning our assumptions, about the power of doubt, even about building our own challenge networks. But, like, the real work starts now. What's one belief you've never really questioned? What would happen if you tried to disprove it? Who are the people you can talk to, who can challenge you to become a better thinker? Until next time, keep those wheels turning and happy rethinking.